The desert wind swept through the open kitchen window, carrying with it the familiar smell of dust, dry sand, and sun-baked asphalt. I shivered slightly, even though the morning sun had begun to warm the small, modest house on the outskirts of Cadral City. I sat at the old table covered with a faded oilcloth, the same one I had used for decades, and started going over the monthly bills. Electricity, water, telephone, every month the same ritual, the same numbers, the same quiet anxiety that came with living alone. My name is Alden Knox. I'm 67 years old, retired, and the only company I keep are the walls of this house and the memories they hold. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, black and strong, and inhaled the steam. That's when I noticed it. An envelope with gold embossing resting quietly on the corner of the table. I had seen it 3 days ago, but hadn't touched it until now. A wedding invitation. Celeste, my daughter, my only child. The girl I hardly know anymore. Almost 2 years had passed since I last saw her. A Christmas visit that lasted barely 2 hours. She sat like a statue, silent, refusing to eat, leaving early, citing a headache. Typical Celeste. Distant, composed, untouchable. And in her way, she reminded me painfully of her mother, Loretta. Loretta had left when Celeste was only 8. "You're too cold, Alden," she said, tears in her eyes. "You don't even notice us." That stung at the time, but it wasn't. True, I noticed. I always noticed. I just didn't know how to show it. Feelings had never been something my family displayed openly. My father never said he loved me, yet he worked 2 jobs so we would always have food and a roof over our heads. My mother, silent and stoic, taught me that love was action, not words. But Loretta was different. She needed words, gestures, warmth. I couldn't give it. Every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat, and eventually, she stopped waiting. She packed up Celeste and left for Riverside, just an hour away, but far enough that our time together became limited and formal, every other weekend, 2 days at a time. I remember picking her up for those visits. She'd climb into the car with the same book in her hands, no matter how many times she'd read it. She'd sit there silently, and I, unsure where to start, remained quiet too. We were strangers. I cooked, she ate. Sometimes we watched TV. Then I drove her back. Week after week, month after month, the distance between us grew, invisible yet undeniable. By the time she was 15, she started making excuses not to visit. By 18, our conversations had dwindled to brief birthday and holiday calls. When she left for college, I feared the silence would stretch into permanent distance. Then came the call, shortly before her graduation. She needed money to rent an apartment. I sent it immediately. Surprisingly, it opened the door to more frequent communication. Not warm, not even comfortable, but at least we talked. Around that time, I began saving. Every month, a portion of my pension went into a separate account. I didn't fully understand why. Perhaps it was a way to make up for lost time, a way to provide her with something I couldn't give in words, a secure home, a stable foundation. I imagined one day handing her a tangible gift, a roof over her head, a place where she could feel safe and unburdened. Not love in words, not hugs, those I had never mastered, but something real, enduring, meaningful. I continued to work in postal inspection until I retired. The job was steady, predictable, and allowed me to save diligently. I lived frugally, simple meals, few outings, no luxuries. The savings grew slowly but surely. When I turned 65 and retired, the account had enough for a substantial down payment on a home that would meet my imagined standard for Celeste. Then came the day she called, unexpected yet deliberate. "Daddy," she said, voice distant like she was reporting the weather. "I'm getting married." The name of her fiancé, Austin Blair, rolled off her tongue casually. "A photographer," she said. "We met at a trade show. 2 months from now, the wedding. She would send an invitation but said I didn't have to come. Promised I would be there, of course. After that call, I threw myself into the hunt for the perfect house. Not just a house, but a gift that could speak for me where my words had failed. A home where a young couple could start a life together. Perhaps one day with children. Somewhere she could laugh, celebrate, and know that I had finally found a way to show her I cared. 3 weeks later, I found it. A 2-story, 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Ketra City. Brick, spacious, a big backyard with a pool, everything a young couple might dream of. It was expensive, but within reach. I placed the deposit, signed the preliminary paperwork, and began planning the gift. Now, sitting at the kitchen table with the invitation in hand, I wondered, should I tell her in advance or surprise her at the wedding? Would she like it? Did I misjudge again? The questions circled endlessly in my mind. I sipped my coffee, now cooled, and pulled out a photo of Celeste from her college graduation. She stood in her robe and cap, diploma in hand, her expression unreadable. Loretta stood beside her, smiling, arm around her shoulders. And I, off to the side, almost invisible, like a ghost in my own daughter's life. I realized how little I truly knew her. I didn't know her favorite music, the books she loved, the breakfasts she enjoyed. I didn't know Austin, really, or why she chose him. But I knew this. I had a chance to do right by her now, to offer something meaningful, tangible, and enduring. Set the cup aside, picked up the invitation, and decided. I would attend the wedding. I would give her the house, a home built from years of careful saving, planning, and hope. Maybe it wouldn't fix everything, but it would be a start. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like hope. Perhaps the house could bridge the gap between us, beginning a new chapter in our fractured relationship. I imagined. Her face when I handed her the keys, her eyes lighting up in surprise and joy. I imagined hearing her laugh again, truly laugh, the sound I had longed to hear for years. I had to act. I picked up the phone and called the realtor, Travis Wills, to check on the progress of the house purchase. Everything was on track. The house would be mine and then hers, a week before the wedding. Perfect timing. I began preparing myself. A new suit, a haircut, a careful plan to appear composed, presentable, proud. I pictured the pre-wedding dinner, the wedding day, and handing her the keys, hoping it would finally speak the words I had never been able to say. I reached for the box of old photographs, flipping through moments from her infancy to graduation. So much lost time, so many missed chances. But perhaps not all was lost. The wedding invitation sat on the table, a simple piece of paper carrying a universe of possibilities. The Desert Horizon real estate office was a glass building downtown, air-conditioned to perfection. Travis Wills, young, slick-haired, and efficient, sat behind the desk, papers spread before him. "Congratulations, Mr. Knox," he said, offering a pen. I read carefully, a habit ingrained from decades in the Postal Service. Line by line, page by page, I made sure every detail was correct. Travis tapped his fingers impatiently. "It's standard. You'll officially own the house in 3 days." I signed. Almost all my savings went into it. But at that moment, doubts evaporated. The thought of Celeste's smile replaced any fear. "Are you sure you don't want to see it one last time?" Travis asked. I shook my head. I had already imagined every room. I saw Celeste and Austin cooking in the kitchen, hosting friends in the living room, children laughing in the garden. That was enough. I shook Travis's hand and stepped out into the hot street. The wedding was 10 days away. Everything was moving as it should, and then the call came from Celeste herself. "Daddy," her voice sounded strained, as it always did when speaking to me. "Tomorrow is the pre-wedding dinner. 7 o'clock, Oasis Restaurant on Palm Canyon Drive. Can you make it? Sure, I answered, trying to hide my surprise that she had reached out directly. I'll be there, sincerely. Okay, she replied. A pause. Austin and his parents will be there, and Mom and Fred was Loretta's second husband. I'd seen him twice, and both times we'd exchange only formal greetings. I'd love to meet Austin, I said sincerely. Okay, she said quietly. I'll see you tomorrow then. She hung up before I could say goodbye. I spent the rest of the day getting ready for dinner. Ironed me best shirt, shined my shoes, thought about what I would say to my daughter's fiancé, the man she had chosen to live with. I wanted to make a good impression. The Oasis turned out to be a fancy restaurant with dim lighting and live jazz music. When I walked in, the maître escorted me to a large table in the corner of the room. Celeste was already there, sitting next to a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard. Across from them was an older couple, obviously Austin's parents. Loretta and Fred hadn't arrived yet. Celeste noticed me and nodded slightly. No smile, no hug. I walked over to the table. Hi, Celeste, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Dash. Hi, she turned to the man next to her. This is Austin. Austin. This is my father, Alden. Austin reluctantly stood up and extended his hand to me. His handshake was sluggish and quick. Nice to meet you, he said in a tone that didn't match his words at all. Likewise, I replied. Congratulations to both of you. Celeste introduced me to Austin's parents, Howard and Alice Blair. They nodded politely, but I could see the appraising look in their eyes. My unfashionable shirt, old-fashioned haircut, and worn jacket didn't fit their idea of what a father of the bride should look like. I sat down across from Celeste, feeling out of place at this celebration of life. Only now did I notice how expensively she was dressed. A silk blouse, a designer watch on her wrist. Austin looked rich too, with a watch that cost probably as much as 3 of my monthly pensions. So what do you do, Alden? Alice Blair asked, taking a sip of wine. I'm retired, I answered. I used to work for the Postal Inspection Service. Oh, she exchanged a quick glance with her husband. How interesting. And you? I asked, trying to make conversation. Howard owns a chain of fashion stores, she said proudly. And I'm an interior designer. Celeste and Austin were whispering about something, not paying attention to us. I noticed him put his hand on her knee in a possessive gesture. How long have you lived in Cadril City? Alice continued. About 20 years, I answered. And before that, Palm Springs. We fly to Palm Springs every winter, Howard said. We have a vacation. House there, 200 square ft, with a view of the mountains. I nodded, not knowing what to say. I was saved by the appearance of Loretta and Fred. My ex-wife had aged, but still retained traces of her former beauty. Fred, a full man with balding hair, held her hand. Loretta froze for a second when she saw me, then smiled strainedly. Alden, she said instead of greeting. Loretta, I nodded. Fred .. Mom. Celeste stood up and hugged her mother. She was different with her, warm and open. After greetings were exchanged, we all sat down at the table. We ordered food and wine. The conversation flowed without me. About the wedding preparations, about the honeymoon in the Bahamas, about Austin's job. Austin just got a contract to do a commercial shoot for Looks Outdoors, Celeste said proudly. It's an amazing opportunity. It's because of my dad's connections, Austin said, smiling smugly. He knows the right people in this business. I listened and watched. Austin talked mostly about himself, his accomplishments, his plans, his vision. Celeste looked at him with an adoration that seemed a little exaggerated to me. Where will you live after the wedding? I asked when there was a pause. We have an apartment in Rancho Mirage, Celeste said, but we're renting for now. I'll soon be earning enough to buy a house, Austin added quickly. I have big plans. I felt a warm feeling spill inside. They didn't know that in a few days they would have their own house. I imagined how surprised Celeste would be, how, maybe for the first time in years, she would look at me with gratitude. I'm sure it'll work out, I said. Austin gave me a condescending look. Of course it will. I'm not one of those people who settle for less. He looked at my worn jacket. A simple life is enough foursome, but I'm always striving for more. I felt a prick. The hint was transparent enough. Different things are important in life, I said calmly. Like what? Austin sounded challenged. Like family, I looked at Celeste, but she avoided my gaze. Oh yes, family is very important, Alice interjected. Howard and I have always supported Austin in every endeavor. Always there for him. It was another jab, this time from my mother-in-law-to-be. I understood the message. Unlike me, they were good parents. Dinner continued in the same vein. I felt like an outsider at this celebration of life. Loretta and the Blair family discussed the details of the wedding. Fred told jokes. Austin talked about his career. Celeste looked at him with adoration. I sat in silence, occasionally inserting neutral phrases into the conversation. When dessert arrived, Austin suddenly turned to me. Celeste says you weren't involved in organizing the wedding. I blinked in surprise. Yeah, I wasn't asked. But you are the father of the bride, he continued with fake concern. Fathers usually pick up some of the cost. There was an awkward silence. I felt myself blush. I'd be happy to help if you need it, I said, looking at Celeste. She shook her head. You don't have to, Dad. We'll be fine. Yeah, we can handle it. Austin backed her up. Luckily, my parents helped with the basic expenses. Alice and Howard exchanged smug smiles. A daughter's wedding is a special day, Alice said. We wanted everything to be perfect. I stayed silent, thinking about the house I just bought, about how surprised everyone at the table would be when they heard about my gift. But it would be a surprise for the wedding itself, not before. When dinner was over, Celeste and Austin were the first to leave. We still have a lot to do before the wedding, Celeste explained without looking me in the eye. Of course, I stood up. It was nice to meet everyone. Austin hugged his parents goodbye, then hugged Loretta and shook Fred's hand. To me, he just nodded. Celeste hugged everyone too, except me. To me, she said, "See you at the wedding, Daddy." And they left, leaving me with my ex-wife, her husband, and Austin's parents. Howard paid for dinner quickly, dismissing my offer to split the bill. Don't bother, he said. I invited you. We left the restaurant together. In the parking lot, Alice stopped suddenly and turned to me. You know, Alden, Celeste told us about you. I froze, waiting for her to continue. She said you weren't much of a part of her life, Alice said softly, but there was venom in her words. I just want you to know that we're going to be a real family for her, the one she never had. I stood there, unable to find the words. Howard put his hand on his wife's shoulder. Come on, honey. It's getting late. They walked away, leaving me alone in the parking lot. I walked slowly back to my old Toyota, feeling broken and devastated. On the way home, I thought about Alice's words, about Austin's condescending attitude, about Celeste's coldness. Was I really that bad of a father? Did I really deserve to be treated this way? The image of Celeste as a child came to mind. The little girl with pigtails who used to run toward me when I came home from work. When did things change? When did we become strangers? I parked in front of my house and sat in my car for a long time without going inside. Tomorrow, I'll get the keys to my new house. Maybe this gift could change everything. Maybe Celeste would finally see that I'd always thought of her, always cared about her, albeit in my own way. I had to believe that. Otherwise, it was pointless. The day of the wedding was surprisingly cool for Cadril City. Rare clouds covered the relentless desert sun, creating almost perfect conditions for an outdoor celebration. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie. The new suit fit well, though I felt uncomfortable in it. Too formal, too out of place. On the bedside table was an envelope with the deeds to the house and my keys tied with a red ribbon. I thought long and hard about how best to present this gift. Should I present it before the ceremony, during their reception? In the end, I decided to wait until after the newlyweds were receiving congratulations and gifts from the guests. It seemed most appropriate. 3 days ago, I received the keys to the house and immediately went to inspect it again. Spacious, light-filled. Rooms, a modern kitchen, a cozy backyard with a patio and pool. It was exactly how I envisioned the perfect home for my daughter. I even hired a gardener to tidy up the garden before showing it to Celeste. After leaving the house, I got in my car and drove to the wedding venue, a country club overlooking the San Jacinto Mountains. The invitation indicated a 4-hour start for the ceremony, but I decided to arrive early to avoid the embarrassment of being late. The parking lot was already filled with expensive cars. My old Toyota looked ridiculous among them. I took the envelope. With the documents, took a deep breath and got out of the car. A girl with a clipboard was standing at the entrance to the club, noting the arriving guests. "Good afternoon," she said with a professional smile. "Your name?" "Alden Knox. I'm the father of the bride." Her smile became a little more genuine. "Of course, Mr. Knox. The ceremony will be held in the garden just outside the main building. You can go there now or wait in the lobby." I decided to look around. The club was luxurious. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, antique furniture. I felt out of place among all this splendor. Some guests had already gathered in the lobby. I didn't recognize any of them. Saleila's friends, Austin's co-workers. I felt awkward approaching and introducing myself. Instead, I found a secluded corner and sat down, watching. Time passed. There were more and more guests. I noticed Austin's parents loudly greeting each newcomer as if they were the hosts of the party. Howard Blair clapped the men on the back. Alice kissed the women on the cheek. They looked completely in their element. At 4:15, a woman I identified as the wedding planner appeared. She announced that guests could proceed to the garden where the ceremony would take place. I rose and followed the crowd. The garden was decorated exquisitely. Rows of white chairs stood on either side of a center aisle lined with rose petals. At the end of the aisle rose an archway covered with flowers and silk ribbons. Beyond it was a view of the mountains, a scene worthy of a movie. I hesitated at the entrance, not knowing where to sit. The front rows are usually reserved for families, but no one directed me there. Finally, I just picked a seat on the edge about in the middle and sat down, clutching my envelope of papers tightly. The musicians began to play a quiet tune. The guests took their seats. I noticed Loretta and Fred in the front row. Loretta was wearing an elegant blue dress. Her hair, now streaked with gray, was styled in an elaborate style. Next to them sat Austin's parents. There was no front row seat for me. The thought pricked unexpectedly hard. I hadn't expected such a small thing to hurt so much, but there was no time to ponder it. The music changed and all heads turned toward the front of the aisle. Austin appeared, dressed in an expensive black tuxedo. He looked cocky, like Eamon used to, being the center of attention. He was followed by 2 men about his age, apparently best men. They stood under the archway, waiting for the bride to appear. And there she was, my Celeste, in a white dress that seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. Her hair was gathered in an elegant bundle adorned with flowers. She was beautiful. I felt a lump come up to my throat. My little girl. When had she grown up to be such a beautiful woman? Fred walked beside her. He was leading her down the aisle, fulfilling the role that traditionally belonged to the father of the bride, a role I was supposed to fulfill. I watched as Fred passed my daughter's hand to Austin as they exchanged loving glances as the ceremony began. All the while, I sat motionless, clutching the envelope with the keys to the house I'd bought for them. The house that was going to be. My way of showing Celeste that I always loved her, always thought of her, even if I didn't know how to express it. The ceremony was short and beautiful. Celeste and Austin exchanged vows, rings, and finally a kiss that confirmed them as husband and wife. The guests applauded, some of the women wiping away tears. I felt moisture on my cheeks, too, but quickly wiped it away. After the ceremony, everyone was invited for cocktails on the patio while the newlyweds took pictures. I stayed seated for a few more minutes, gathering my thoughts, then slowly made my way to the bar. Ordering a glass of whiskey, I observed the guests. They all seemed to know each other, laughing, hugging, exchanging news. I stood apart, a stranger at my own daughter's celebration of life. An hour later, the guests were invited into the banquet hall. Round tables were arranged there, each decorated with floral arrangements and candles. At the entrance was a board with the seats. I found my name at table number 8, the farthest from the main table where the newlyweds and their closest relatives were supposed to sit. At my table were some distant relatives of Austin's and a couple who introduced themselves as Celeste's co-workers. They greeted me politely, but the conversation didn't flow. After a few attempts, I left them to talk amongst themselves and focused on my plate. When the main courses were finished, the toast began. The best man, a friend of Austin's from his college days, spoke first. He told funny stories from their youth, making the guests laugh. Then, Loretta took the floor. She talked about what a wonderful daughter Celeste had always been, how talented and determined she was. She thanked Howard and Alice for welcoming Celeste into their family with open arms. Not a word was said about me. After the toast, the dancing began. Celeste and Austin opened the evening with a beautiful waltz. Celeste then danced with Fred and Austin danced with her mother. I watched all of this from behind my desk, still clutching my envelope of papers. When the formal part was over and the guests had dispersed as some were dancing, some were out on the terrace getting some air, some were gathered around the bar, I decided it was time for my gift. I walked over to the table where there were boxes and envelopes of gifts and put my envelope on top, then headed over to Celeste, who was standing surrounded by her friends. "Celeste," I said as I walked closer, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She turned around and something resembling annoyance flashed across her face. "What is it, Dad?" "I wanted to give you my present in person." I pointed to Thedable of presents. "It's over there in the envelope." She sighed. "Okay, I'll be right there." I stepped back to the table and waited. A few minutes later, Celeste came over, followed by Austin. "So, what about the present?" she asked, clearly anxious to get back to her friends. I took the envelope and handed it to her. "This is for both of you. I hope you like it." Celeste took the envelope and opened it. She pulled out the papers and ran her eyes over the first page. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. "This is house." I nodded, feeling my heart pounding with excitement. "Yes, I bought it for you. 4 bedrooms, pool, big garden. It's in a nice neighborhood." Austin snatched the papers from Celeste's hands and began to read. His face changed too, but not from joy or gratitude. "What the hell is this?" he said, looking at me. "Is this some kind of joke?" I was confused. "No, of course not. This is my wedding present to you." "A gift?" Celeste looked at me as if I'd said something offensive. "After all these years, you think you can just buy a house and everything will be fine." I didn't understand her reaction. "I thought you'd be happy. The house is beautiful and it's fully paid for." "Oh, so you think you can pay it off?" Celeste raised her voice, and several of the nearest guests turned in our direction. "You think you can skip 20 years of my life, and then just come and buy me a house and that'll fix everything?" Austin put his hand on her shoulder, but not to comfort her. "You know what?" he said, looking at me with disdain. "We don't need your handout. We're not beggars." It's not a handout, I countered. It's a gift from my daughter's father. Father? Celeste was almost screaming now. You weren't my father. You were just a man who showed up in my life once in a while, sat there stone-faced, and didn't even try to recognize me. The people around us fell silent. Everyone was looking at our little scene. I saw Loretta heading towards us with a concerned look on her face. Celeste, I've always loved you, I said quietly. I just didn't know how to show it. Loved you? She laughed bitterly. Loving fathers don't miss school plays. Loving fathers don't just call on birthdays. Loving fathers take an interest in their children's lives. Every word hit like a hammer. The worst part was I knew she was right. I wasn't a model father. I didn't know how to express my feelings. I didn't know how to be there for her the way she needed me to be. I tried the best I could. I said, "This house I've been saving for years to give it to you. We don't need your house." Austin cut me off. We'll have our own house bought with my money. Loretta walked over to us. What's going on? Dad has decided to buy us a house, Celeste said bitterly. He thinks he can buy a role in my life. Alden, Loretta looked at me with pity. I think you'd better leave. Yeah, get out, Celeste shouted and her voice trailed off. Get out and don't come back. You've ruined my wedding day like you've ruined everything in my life. I stood stunned by her words. A crowd of guests had gathered around us. I saw Howard and Alice Blair looking at me with judgment. I saw Fred shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. I saw strangers whispering as they looked at me. You heard my daughter, Austin said, stepping forward. Get out of here. You're not needed. Here. I nodded slowly, feeling something inside me finally break. Okay, I said quietly. I'll leave and take your papers. Austin threw the deeds to the house at my feet. We don't need your pity. I bent down to pick up the papers and heard a chuckle. Some of the guests were finding the situation amusing. Straightening up, I looked into Celeste's eyes. I regret not being the kind of father you wanted me to be. But I never stopped loving you. She turned away without saying a word. I turned and walked toward the exit, feeling the stares of everyone present. Some were whispering, some were laughing, openly. I could hear Austin saying something loudly to his friends, and they were laughing. Stepping out into the fresh air, I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. The pain was almost physical, like someone had ripped out a part of my heart. I walked to the parking lot and got in my car. The deed to the house was on the passenger seat. The house I had bought with so much hope. The house that was supposed to be bridge between me and my daughter had turned out to be another wall. I started the engine and drove slowly out of the parking lot, leaving behind the bright holiday lights, music, and laughter. Leaving behind my daughter, who had just told me she didn't want to see me. I drove slowly as if in a fog. My thoughts were confused. I heard Celeste's words over and over in my head. Get out. I heard Austin and his friends laughing. There was the music of the wedding waltz. As I drove up to my house, I suddenly realized I was crying. Tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't even try to hold them back or wipe them away. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to openly express my pain. I parked in front of the house and sat in the car for a long time, unable to get out. The deeds to the house lay nearby. Useless papers, a symbol of my failed attempt to make things right. In that moment, I made a decision. I'm going to sell the house. I will use the money in a different way. I will start a new chapter in my life. A chapter without the pain of rejection, without the futile attempts to earn the love I don't want to be given. I wiped my tears and got out of the car. My back was straight, my shoulders squared. No matter what happens today, I will keep my dignity. It was all I had left. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely empty. It was as if I'd burned. Out inside, and all that was left was ash. For a few minutes, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of yesterday in my head. Celestis Ward's, Austin's taunts, the pitying looks from the guests, the deeds to the house lay on the kitchen table. I sat in front of them with a cup of coffee, rereading the terms of the deal and pondering my next steps. The house was fully paid for, according to the deed. I was its sole owner. I could do whatever I wanted with it, sell it. It seemed like the only right thing to do. I picked up the phone and dialed Travis Wills, the realtor I'd worked with on the purchase. "Travis Wills speaking," came his energetic voice. "Good morning, Travis. This is Alden Knox. Mr. Knox." His tone became even more enthusiastic. "It's good to hear from you. How are you enjoying your new home? Have you moved in yet?" "No," I paused. "I want to sell it." There was a brief silence. "Sell it?" Travis asked. "But you just bought it. Is there something wrong with the house?" "There's nothing wrong with the house. It's just due a change of circumstances." "I understand," he said, though it was obvious he didn't. "Well, the market's booming. I think we can sell it for a small profit. When would you like to start the process?" "Today," I answered. "The sooner the better." We agreed to meet in 2 hours at his office. I hung up the phone and finished my cold coffee. The decision had been made, and I felt a little better. Getting ready for the meeting, I thought about what I would do with the money from the sale. The amount was considerable. I could put it in an account and live off the interest supplementing my pension. I could buy a smaller apartment in a more upscale neighborhood. I could. And then I had a thought that made me freeze with my shirt half-buttoned. What if I spent that money on myself? Not on investments, not on real estate, but on living, on something I'd always dreamed of but never allowed myself. Travel, the roads of America, freedom. When I was young, long before I met Loretta, I dreamed of buying a van and traveling all over the States. See the Grand Canyon at sunrise, ride the Golden Gate in San Francisco, visit the jazz clubs of New Orleans, hike the fall forests of New England, but then there was work, marriage, responsibility. Dreams got pushed aside and then forgotten. What if now when I'm 67 and Dowie no one anything, I finally realize that dream? Buy a nice van, convert it for life, and hit the road. The thought filled me with an excitement that I hadn't felt in years. I quickly finished getting dressed and left the house with renewed determination. The meeting with Travis was quick and businesslike. He explained the selling process. We signed the necessary paperwork, and he promised to start looking for buyers. Immediately. Given the location and condition of the house, I think we can sell it within a month. 2 at the most, he said as he shook my hand goodbye. When I left the office, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I headed to Desert Motors, a dealership that specialized in vans and campers. I just wanted to take a look, get a price quote. But when I saw it, a silver Ford Transit with a high roof and extended base, I knew it was exactly what I needed. The young salesman, seeing my interest, came over and started telling me about the specifications. Diesel engine, all-wheel drive, fuel economy. I listened half-heartedly, imagining how I could convert this empty van into a cozy home on wheels, a bed, a small kitchen, storage space, maybe even a tiny bathroom. "How much does it cost?" I asked, interrupting the flow of technical information. The seller quoted an amount that was about a quarter of the expected proceeds for the house, fairly reasonable. Another quarter would be spent on remodeling and improvements. That would leave half, more than enough, for a few years of traveling, given my pension. I didn't buy the van straight away. I had to wait until the house was sold. But I did pick up a brochure and contacts for companies that convert vans into motor homes. When I got home, I felt a surge of energy for the first time in a long time. I sat down at my computer and started researching routes, national parks, campsites for motorhomes, made lists of places I wanted to visit, watched videos about RV life, planning. Planning helped me not think about Celeste, about the wedding, about my humiliation. I was completely absorbed in a new idea, a new goal. For the first time in decades, I thought only of myself, of my desires, and it was, liberating. 2 weeks later, Travis called with good news. We have a buyer, Mr. Knox, a young couple with a child. They're willing to pay even a little over asking price. They really like the house in the neighborhood. We set up an appointment to sign the papers. Everything happened quickly, as if fate itself was pushing me towards a new life. The day I signed the documents to sell the house was a turning point in my life. The money was deposited into my account, and now there was nothing to stop me from realizing my plan. I immediately went to the car dealership and bought that silver Ford. Then I contacted a company specializing in van conversions and ordered a complete interior makeover. They showed me designs, samples of materials, and layout options. I chose the essentials: a comfortable bed, a compact kitchen with a stove and a small refrigerator, a folding table, a storage system, solar panels on the roof for autonomous power supply, a small bathroom with a shower and a bio-toilet. Everything is thought out to the last detail. Everything is functional and yet cozy. The remodeling process was to take about a month. During that time, I planned to sell most of the furniture and belongings from my house, leaving only the essentials that could fit in the van. I felt like a man who had shed a heavy load. For decades, I had lived with the idea that I owed something to Celeste, that I had to make up for my mistakes to earn her forgiveness and love. Now that chain was broken. I was free, both from guilt and from false hopes. 3 weeks after the wedding, when the van remodeling process was in full swing and I was selling things off through online auctions, something happened that I didn't expect. My phone rang. Celeste's name popped upon the screen. I stared at it, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to answer it, to hear her voice. The other part remembered her words at the wedding, remembered the humiliation. I didn't answer. After a minute, my phone showed that I had a new voicemail. I didn't listen to it. That evening, she called again. Again, I didn't answer. The next day, another call. Then a messenger message. "Daddy, we need to talk. Please call me back." I didn't call back. 2 more days later, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Austin. He was standing there shuffling from foot to foot, clearly nervous. I didn't answer it. He rang a few more times, then started knocking. "Mr. Knox," he shouted. "I know you're home. We need to talk." I sat in the chair without moving until he left. The next day, I got an email from Celeste. "Dad, we found out you sold the house. The very one you wanted to give us. Austin and I want to apologize for our behavior at the wedding. Please, let's meet and talk. It's important." I didn't respond to that email either. A week later, as I was taking the mail out of the box, my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow with whom we sometimes exchange pleasantries, approached me. "Mr. Knox," she said, "a young couple came to see you. They were very insistent in asking about you. I said I hadn't seen you for several days." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." I nodded. "This is my daughter and her husband. We have some disagreements." "Oh, family quarrels are the hardest," she sighed. "I hope you two make up." I didn't say anything. Reconciliation wasn't part of my plan. That evening, I got a text from Travis Wills. "Mr. Knox, your daughter and her husband came to my office today. They were asking about the house you sold. I couldn't give them the details of the transaction, of course, but I mentioned that the house had already been sold to other people. They seemed very upset. I hope everything is okay with you." I grinned. Now I could see where the sudden interest had come from. They'd heard about the sale of the house and probably realized they'd missed their chance. I wonder what they would have said when they met. Would they apologize? Would they try to convince me to cancel the deal? Would they have offered to buy them another house? It didn't matter anymore. The decision had been made, and I wasn't going to change it. The next day, I drove to the workshop to see how my van was coming along. The progress was impressive. Inside, the frames for the bed and kitchen were already in place. The electrical wiring had been laid, and the finishing of the walls had begun. The foreman, an elderly man named Ray, proudly showed me every detail. "In 2 weeks it will be ready," he said. "Have you decided where you will go first?" "Up north," I said. "Oregon, Washington. I want to see the forest and the ocean." "That's a good choice." Ray nodded approvingly. "I was up there myself last summer. It's beautiful." When I got home, I found another message from Celeste on my answering machine. "Dad, please call me back. This is really important. Austin and I want to apologize. We were wrong. Please." There was a desperation in her voice that might have moved me before, but not now. I saw the situation clearly now. They only wanted to contact me after they found out about the sale of the house. Not before. Not the day after the wedding when they could have called and apologized for their behavior. No, not until they realized they had missed out financially. The calls and texts continued for a few more days. I ignored them all. Instead, I was busy. Preparing for my new life, researching routes, planning stops, reading reviews of campgrounds and attractions. I began to realize that I hadn't been living my life for the past few decades. All my decisions, all my actions were dictated by a sense of duty, a sense of guilt, a desire to right past wrongs. I had forgotten about my own dreams, my own desires. And now, at 67, I was finally beginning to live for myself. This realization didn't bring bitterness, rather a strange calmness. It was as if I had finally found my way after years of wandering in the dark. One evening, as I was sorting through my things, deciding what to take with me on my trip and what to leave behind, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Celeste, alone without Austin. I saw her through the peephole. She looked tired, dark, circles under her eyes. I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to open up to hear what she had to say. But the other part, the part that was finally free, knew that no good would come of it. Any conversation would only lead to more pain, more disappointment. I didn't open the door. Celeste stood at the door for almost 20 minutes, ringing and knocking. Then I heard her crying softly. Finally, she left. The next day, I got one last message from her. "Daddy, I realize you don't want to see us. We behaved horribly at the wedding. I said things I shouldn't have said, but please give us a chance to apologize in person. Austin and I will be waiting for you at the Morning Star Cafe tomorrow morning at 10 Saxo. Please come." I reread the message several times. Part of me wanted to go to hear their apology, but what would it change? Would it bring back the years of arrangement? Would it heal the wounds caused by Celeste's words at the wedding? Would it change the way they treated me for real and not because of money? I knew the answer, and the decision was made. Tomorrow, I'm not going to the cafe. Tomorrow, I will go to pick up my finished van, my new home, my new life. And in a day or two, I would be leaving Cadril City, leaving behind everything that tied me to the past, my home, my memories, my unfulfilled hopes for a relationship with my daughter. It was a hard decision, but the only right one. Sometimes you have to let go in order to move on, and I was ready to move on. The morning was clear and cool. I woke up early, feeling strangely calm. Today was the day I was to pick up my van, fully, equipped, ready for the long haul. One last step before starting a new life. I wasn't going to go to the Morning Star Cafe where Celeste and Austin were waiting for me. Instead, it planned to drive to the shop, pick up the van, and then come home and finish packing. I scheduled my departure for the next morning early at dawn. I showered, shaved, dressed, and ate breakfast. I checked the list of things I was going to take with me. Clothes for different seasons, a few books, a laptop, documents, necessary medicines, kitchen utensils, camping equipment. Everything was ready, neatly packed in boxes, waiting to be loaded. At 9, I left the house and got into the car. The workshop was on the outskirts of town, about half an hour away. I turned on the radio. They were playing old rock hits from the '80s, the music of my youth, singing along to the familiar tunes. I drove out of my neighborhood and headed toward the highway. And that's when I saw them. Celeste and Austin were standing by their car parked across the street from my house. As soon as I pulled out, they got in their car and followed me. I cursed to myself. They'd obviously decided to intercept me before the cafe, fearing I wouldn't show up for the meeting. And they were right. For a while, I wondered what to do. Try to break away, drive to the workshop, hoping they'd back off. Or should I meet them and end this farce once and for all? In the end, I decided it was better to end it now. I pulled into a parking lot by a small park, a neutral area where we could talk without attracting too much attention. Their car, a brand new white Audi, parked nearby. I got out and without waiting, for them, headed for the bench by the artificial pond. It was still early, and there was almost no one in the park, just an elderly couple walking a small dog and a lone jogger running laps on the path. Celeste and Austin walked over and stopped a few feet away from me. They looked different than they had at the wedding. Celeste was pale with circles under her eyes as if she hadn't slept for several nights. Austin had lost some of his swagger. He stood slouched, his eyes running. "Daddy," Celeste began, "thank you for agreeing to talk." "I didn't agree," I said calmly. "You just tracked me down." "We've been trying to contact you for weeks." Her voice trembled. "You didn't answer the phone. You didn't answer the door. After what happened at the wedding, are you surprised?" She lowered her eyes. "We behaved terribly. I said things I shouldn't have said. I was emotional. It was a stressful day. And you waited almost a month to apologize," I pointed out. "Only after you found out about selling the house." Celeste and Austin exchanged quick glances. In that exchange, I saw everything I needed to know about the purpose of their visit. "We talked to the realtor," Austin interjected. "He said you sold the house to that young couple." "That's right," I confirmed. "But why?" Celeste stepped closer. "You wanted to give it to us, and you didn't want to accept it," I reminded her. "You made it pretty clear that you didn't want my gift." We were wrong." Austin tried to put a guilty expression on his face. "We didn't. Appreciate your generosity." "The deal's closed," I said. "The house is sold. The money is received and spent. The matter is closed. Spent." Celeste looked stunned. "All the money? Most of it?" "Yes." "For what?" Austin sounded disbelieving. I didn't answer right away. I looked at both of them at their confused faces. They really couldn't imagine that I could spend that much money on anything other than them. "It doesn't matter," I said at last. "The money is mine, and I've used it as I see fit. Daddy." Celeste suddenly knelt down in front of me. "Please forgive us. We made a terrible mistake. I've been so ungrateful." Austin, after a second's hesitation, knelt down beside her as well. Mr. Knox. His voice sounded unacceptably humble. I acted like an idiot. We both realized what a fool we were to refuse your generous gift. I looked at them kneeling before me and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. Just a strange detachment, as if I were watching a scene from a movie I wasn't particularly interested in. "Stand up," I said. "You look ridiculous." They stood up, exchanging uncertain glances. "Daddy," Celeste continued, "maybe we could start over. I know we've hurt you, but we're truly remorseful." "A fresh start?" I allowed myself a slight chuckle. "Start over what exactly?" "We never had a real relationship, Celeste. You said so yourself at the wedding." "I didn't mean it." She shook her head. "I was upset. I was angry." "You were being completely honest," I countered. "For the first time in years, and I appreciate that honesty. It helped me see the situation for what it was." "But Mr. Knox," Austin interjected, "we really want to make things right. Maybe we could, I don't know, help you in some way. I have connections. I might be able to. I raised my hand, stopping him. I don't need your help. I've made a decision about my life, and it doesn't include you. What do you mean? Celeste frowned. I sighed. Maybe I should have just walked away without explaining myself. But some part of me wanted them to know exactly what they'd lost, what they'd given up with their arrogance and cruelty. I bought a van, I said, converted it into a mobile home. I'm leaving Catadill City tomorrow, traveling the country, visiting the places I've always wanted to see, live the life I've always put off for later. They looked at me with such amazement that in another situation I might have found it amusing. The van, Austin interjected. You spent the money from the sale of the house on a van and on retrofitting it? I nodded and on making sure I could travel for the next few years. But that's crazy. Austin couldn't contain his indignation. A man your age can't just go and live in a van. I can, I said calmly, and I will, Daddy. Celeste looked confused. You can't just spend all that money on yourself. Why not? I looked her straight in the eye. It's mine. I earned it, saved it for years, and I have every right to spend it as I see fit. But Im hesitated. But you wanted to leave it to us. That was your intention. It was, I agreed, before the wedding. Before you told me to get lost and called my gift a handout. Austin tried to interject. Mr. Knox, I understand you're upset, but I'm not upset. I interrupted him. I'm free. For the first time in years, I don't feel obligated to people who only see me as a source of financial support. That's not fair, Celeste exclaimed. I never considered you as a really... I raised an eyebrow. Then why didn't you contact me until after you knew the house was sold, not the day after the wedding to apologize for your behavior? Not a week later when your emotions had subsided. Not when I realized I'd lost the money. She blushed, and I saw in her eyes what I was looking for. Confirmation of my words. It wasn't just the money, she said quietly. I really wanted to make up, but the money was an important part of it, I pointed out. Maybe even the main reason. Austin, losing patience, blurted out, Okay, yes, money is important. We're a young family starting out in life. We need help. Isn't it natural for a father to want to help his daughter? It's natural, I agreed. But it's also natural that a daughter should respect her father, that she shouldn't humiliate him in front of her family and friends, that she shouldn't reject his gift with contempt and then run after him when she realized he was gone. I'm sorry about that, Celeste said, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm really sorry. I believe you are sorry, I replied. But not for hurting me. It's that you lost your home. That's not true. It isn't. I got up from the bench. Then prove it. Accept my decision to leave. Wish me a happy journey. No accusations, no trying to make me feel guilty for spending your money. They were silent for a moment. Celeste stared at the ground. Austin gritted his teeth, clearly holding back an angry tirade. Just as I thought, I said. You don't want a relationship with me? You want money. You're wrong, Celeste whispered. Maybe, I shrugged. But it doesn't matter now. I've made my choice. You've made yours. Our paths have parted, and you're just going. To leave? Austin didn't hide his indignation. You're going to abandon your daughter without even trying to mend the relationship? I tried, I said calmly. 20 years I tried. Saved up the money to give her a house. I went to the wedding when they wouldn't even give me a front row seat. I put up with your condescending looks and your barbs. And what did I get in return? Get out. So yes, I'm leaving. And no, I'm not going to try again. Celeste suddenly burst into tears. Not quiet tears, but actual sobs that shook her entire body. Austin awkwardly put his arm around her shoulders, casting an accusing look at me. See what you've done? He said. You've put her in such a state. No, Austin, I shook my head. It was their realization that she'd lost her home that put her in that state, and maybe a little acting to make me feel guilty. You're a monster, he hissed. No, I shook my head again. I'm just a man who finally saw the truth and decided to live my own life, not someone else's expectations. I walked around them and headed for my car. Celeste, through her sobs, shouted after me, "You're going to regret this, Daddy. When you're alone in that stupid van of yours, you're going to regret it." I stopped and turned around. You know, Celeste, I've done a lot of things in my life that I've regretted. Married a woman who didn't understand me, let her take you away and turn you against me. I didn't fight for our relationship when I had the chance. But this, I pointed at the van. I'll never regret this. I got in the car and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see them. Celeste sobbing on Austin's shoulder and him staring after me with an expression of impotent rage. They couldn't believe he was really leaving, that I'd spent their money on me, that I had chosen freedom over trying to buy their love. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the workshop. On the way, I felt a strange calmness. It was as if the heavyweight I'd been carrying my whole life had suddenly disappeared. I was no longer indebted to Celeste. I wasn't bound by obligations that arose out of guilt. I was free, really free, for the first time in decades. Waiting for me in the workshop was Ray standing proudly beside my van. And what a van! The silver Ford had been transformed. It was now a real home on wheels with solar panels on the roof, a compact kitchen, a comfortable bed, a shower and toilet, and an elaborate storage system. It was exactly as I dreamed it would be. "How was it?" Rai asked, eagerly awaiting my reaction. I walked around the van, inspecting every detail, checking all the systems. Everything was perfect. "Oh, it's exactly what I needed," I said, not hiding my admiration. "You did a great job, Rai." "Glad you like it," he brightened. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," I said, impatience in my voice. "Have a safe trip." Ray shook my hand. "And safe journey. A safe journey." The words sounded like a blessing. I got behind the wheel of the van, started the engine, and drove slowly out of the shop. My new home. My ticket to a new life. As I drove back to the old house, I thought about meeting Celeste and Austin, about their faces when they found out the money had been spent, about their attempts to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty, and I realized I'd made the right decision, the only decision I could make. Tomorrow, I'm leaving Cathedral City. I will leave behind my old life, my old grudges, my old hopes. Ahead is the road, freedom, and a whole world waiting to be seen. Dawn over the Mojave Desert is a sight worth seeing at least once in a lifetime. The red-orange sun slowly rises over the horizon, painting the rocky peaks in the colors of flame. The air is clean and clear, filled with the sense of wild grasses and heated sand. I sat on a folding chair by my van, sipping freshly brewed coffee from an iron mug. My camp was set up in a small camping area near Joshua Tree National Park. There were a few other motorhomes and tents around, but at this early hour everyone was still asleep. It had been 3 weeks since I'd left Cadral City, 3 weeks of a new life. I moved without much of a plan, stopping where I liked, leaving when I wanted to change. The first few days were a little awkward. I was getting used to life in the van, learning how to conserve water, operate the solar panel system, find convenient parking spots. But soon it became a habit, second nature. I crossed the California-Nevada border, drove to Las Vegas, but not to play in the casinos, just to see that city of neon lights. Then headed north to Utah's national parks. Zion, Bryce Canyon, Capitol, Reef. Each one struck me with its wild, ethereal beauty. I spent days exploring hiking trails, photographing amazing landscapes, reading books in the shade of juniper trees, and all the while I didn't think about Celeste. Or rather, I tried not to. Sometimes, of course, the memories would come flooding back, especially in the evenings when he sat by the fire looking up at the stars. Then I allowed myself a few minutes of sadness, a few minutes of thinking about what might have been, and then I'd let those thoughts go like balloons and come back to the present moment. I kept my phone off most of the time, turning it on every few days to check the weather and maybe the news. Celeste kept calling and texting. I didn't read the messages, didn't listen to the voicemail. Whatever she had to say didn't matter anymore. After Utah, I turned west back to California, but this time toward the coast. I drove through the Sierra Nevada mountains, stopping in small towns, talking to the locals, sampling regional specialties at roadside cafes, and now I'm back in the desert, but with a new perspective on the world and my life. The sun had risen higher and the air was starting to heat up. I finished my coffee and decided to take a walk before it got too hot. I put on a wide-brimmed hat, grabbed a bottle of water, and a camera I'd bought in one of the towns along the way. The path led through thickets of cacti and bizarre Joshua trees, so named by Mormon settlers, to whom they reminded me of the biblical prophet raising his hands in prayer. I walked slowly, stopping to photograph particularly interesting specimens, watching lizards slithering across the heated rocks and birds soaring through the blue sky. When I returned to camp, the neighbors were already awake. An elderly couple from Morgan was cooking breakfast on a portable stove. A young family with 2 children was packing for a trip to the park. In the corner of the site, I noticed a new camper that hadn't been there yesterday. A compact bright blue van with solar panels similar to mine. A woman about my age was fiddling with it, setting up a folding table and chairs. She caught my eye and waved. "Good morning, neighbor," she shouted. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I came. Closer. "Beautiful indeed," I agreed. "How long have you been here?" "Got here late last night." She held out her hand. "Ela Murphy. Alden Knox." I shook her hand. "Traveling alone, too." "3rd year?" She smiled. After I retired, I decided I'd stop staying home and waiting for my grandchildren to visit their grandmother. I bought this van and have been on the road ever since. We got to talking. Elaine was a school teacher from Minnesota, widowed 10 years ago. 2 children, 5 grandchildren, all scattered in different states. She talked about the places she'd visited, the people she'd met on, the road, the freedom this lifestyle gave her. "How about you?" she asked. "How long have you been on the road?" "Only 3 weeks," I answered. "I'm new at this." "Oh, then you have a lot to learn," she laughed. "I've got great maps of campgrounds, lists of places to stay for free, contacts of mechanics who won't rip you off. I can share them with you if you want. I can share if you want." We spent the afternoon swapping stories and tips. Elaine told me about a community of van lifers, people who live in vans and travel the country, about the meetings they organize, the mutual help, the friendships that arise on the road. "You should join us at the next meeting," she said. "In 2 weeks. In New Mexico, there will be 30 or 40 hobos like us, grilling, music, swapping stories and itineraries. You'll love it." I agreed, surprised at my decision. I used to avoid large crowds, preferring solitude, but now, for some reason, the thought of meeting other travelers seemed appealing. The next day, Elaine and I set out to explore the national park. She knew the trails that weren't in the tourist brochures, the places with the best views. We climbed one of the rocky peaks and sat there for a long time, looking out at the vast desert below. "You know what I love about this lifestyle?" Elaine said as we walked back to the campground. "That every day is a new beginning. No past to drag you back. No obligations that hold you back. Just you, the road, and the possibilities." I nodded, realizing what she meant. For the first time in years, I felt the same way. Freedom from the past, from expectations, from guilt, freedom to be myself. A few days later, Ella and I split off in different directions. She east to the Grand Canyon, I north to the Oregon coast. but we exchanged contacts and agreed to meet at a gathering in New Mexico. Traveling along the Pacific coast was one of the most vivid experiences of my life. The majestic sequoias reaching into the sky, rocky shores that the waves crash against, small seaside towns with their leisurely pace of life. I spent entire days sitting on the beach looking at the ocean, listening to the cries of the seagulls. And for the first time in a long time, calm, peaceful, like I had found my place in the world. I arrived in New Mexico just in time for the van lifer meeting. Elaine was right. There were about 40 RVs, motorhomes, and campers of all shapes and sizes gathered. People of all ages and backgrounds united by a love of the road and freedom. I was greeted like an old friend, even though I didn't know anyone but Elaine. There was something special about this community. The openness, the willingness to accept a newcomer, to share experiences, to help with advice. That first evening, I met Tom and Sarah, a married couple from Michigan who had been living in their motor home for 5 years. Ramon, a former chef from New York who traveled with his dog. Janet, an artist who stayed in beautiful places to paint landscapes and then sold the paintings to fund further travel. They all had their own stories, their own reasons for choosing this lifestyle. Some, like me, sought freedom from the past. Some sought new experiences. Some just couldn't stay in one place. You know what the most amazing thing about this company is? Elaine told me the second day we met, sitting around the campfire, that we're all so different, but we understand each other better than our family back home. I reflected on her words. Indeed, I felt a strange connection to these people I'd only known for a couple days. A deeper connection than with Celeste, with whom I shared blood ties, but saw many misunderstandings and resentments. The meeting lasted a week. We cooked together, shared stories of the road, helped each other with RV repairs, played cards in the evenings, sang guitar around the campfire, and the whole time I didn't turn on my phone, didn't check messages, didn't think about the past. I was completely in the present moment, enjoying every minute of it. When it was time to disperse, I found that I had a new circle of friends. We arranged new meetings, exchanged itineraries, and created a group on Messenger to keep in touch. I, who had always considered myself a loner, was suddenly part of a community, and that sense of belonging was pleasant. Months succeeded each other. I traveled through Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, saw Yellowstone with its geysers and hot springs. I've watched herds of bison in Badlands National Park, fished in Minnesota's crystal-clearer lakes, photographed fall, leaves in New England. Sometimes I traveled alone. Sometimes I joined other van lifers. We would meet at designated places, spend a few days or weeks together, then drift apart again. A traveling tribe bound together by invisible threads of friendship and shared values. Elaine and I met most often. Our routes often crossed as if an invisible force had brought us together. We became close friends. Sometimes I thought maybe something more, but neither of us rushed things. We had all the time in the world. The year passed unnoticed. I changed, tanned, lost weight, grew a beard. I smiled more, took life easier. I learned to find joy in small things. In a cup of coffee drunk at dawn, in a conversation with a stranger in a roadside cafe, in the sunset, painting the sky in incredible colors, and all the while Celeste kept calling and writing. I knew this because sometimes turning on my phone I saw the notifications, but I didn't open the messages, didn't listen to the voicemail. It was another life, another world to which I no longer belonged. One day, exactly a year after I left Cadril City, I found myself back in California. Didn't plan it on purpose. It was just the route that brought me here. I stayed at a small campground near the coast, a couple hours' drive from my former home. I was sitting on a rock in the morning looking out at the ocean when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out going to check the weather forecast and saw a new message from Celeste. "Dad, I know you don't read my messages, but I keep writing because I hope one day you will read them. I've made a mistake." Many mistakes. I lost my father because of my pride and stupidity. If you ever want to talk, I'll be waiting always. Love you. I stared at the screen, not knowing how to feel. A year ago, those words might have moved me. Made me go back, try to make things right. But now I was a different person. I had found my path, my happiness, and it didn't depend on Celeste's forgiveness or her love. Without answering the message, I turned off my phone and tucked it into my pocket. I sat there for a moment, staring at the ocean, saying goodbye to the past for good. Then I got up and walked to my van. Elaine was waiting for me there. We agreed to meet here and travel the Northwest coast together. "Are you ready?" she asked, smiling. I nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the joy of the journey ahead, of her company, of the freedom that was now an integral part of my life. "Where should we go first?" I asked, getting behind the wheel. "Anywhere," she shrugged. "The whole world is in front of us." I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine rumbled softly. There was a road ahead, new places, new encounters, new discoveries. The life I had chosen for myself, a life in which I was finally happy. The van touched down, leaving behind the ocean, the cliffs, and symbolically the last link to my past. I felt no bitterness or regret, only gratitude for finding a way back to my present self in the sunset of my life. Celeste's message went unread. Maybe someday I'll open it. Maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter now. The only thing that mattered was the present. The road stretching out over the horizon, the woman sitting next to me, and the freedom I'd finally found.